Reka, it's great to have you on the panel, and thank you as well to the Hilton for sponsoring this event today. It's an absolute honour to have you here. Now, you're General Manager of the Hilton in Brighton, and I remember when you first came here a few years ago, and Brighton's business network, you know, I'm sure many of us have experienced it, it can be a bit cliquey. And obviously the Hilton is a big venue where many businesses would have liaised with the general manager, and you know, you get used to people when they go, you know, some people don't embrace new people and new expertise, and you just came in like a boss. And you've done so many great things, but tell us a little bit about your experience. What was it like, you know, first coming to Brighton, didn't know the area, you're a new face, you've got to, you know, build your profile within the business community, which you have done effortlessly. But tell us a little bit about your journey.
Thank you so much for having me, Stephanie, and good afternoon to everyone. So when I matriculated way back in 1995, and I am giving away my age, just give a few years, my biggest assignment before coming to the UK 5 years ago was running one of the biggest casinos in South Africa, which was Empress Palace. We had about 1,500 slot machines, about 320 tables, I think about 800 keys or 800 bedrooms, a combination of 4 hotels, 29 F&B outlets, including restaurants. So it was massive. And I skipped a few years and we decided that because of the political and economic situation in South Africa, we'd come to Brighton, we'll come to the UK. When I first came in, I knew nothing about the UK geography, I knew nothing about the UK hospitality climate, and in saying that, before we actually came to the UK, I possibly applied for 500 jobs internationally. And the one thing they said is, you know, you don't have the experience, you know, you've got the big boxes, but you don't have the geolocation. And eventually I then applied for a company in the UK, and I was taken on as Chief Commercial Officer for a local hospitality group that was based in Scotland. And there again, I actually thought to myself, you're allowing me to run your revenues for 14 hotels, but I have no clue as to what I'm doing. And that's the reality. And then I realized that I was reading a book by Richard Branson's autobiography, and the one thing that stood out for me is, if you don't know how to do a job, say yes and learn. And boy, did I have to learn very quick, right? Because you're dealing with owners, you're dealing with GMs, and you're guiding, and you're giving them counsel. But then again, I think it was very challenging, but it helped me learn what I needed to learn to then take my foot into the door with Hilton. And then skip a couple of months because Hilton then approached me, and the rest, as they say, is history. I found myself in Brighton. I remember before I signed my contract, I took the chance, and it was the 16th of December, a really cold day. I came across and I went, my word. So I walked into the bathroom, this was prior to the hotel being refurbished, and I saw this massive crack on the floor and alongside the counter, and I thought to myself, what am I getting into? Is this what I want to be? And the hotel was really busy, it was Christmas, and I couldn't find a manager in sight, so I just had a coffee and walked up and thought, okay, I'll do this. My first week in Brighton was absolutely daunting, because it was taking on a property that was undergoing a £26 million refurbishment, leading and guiding a new team, not knowing anyone. But I think the two things that stood out for me is just how the team came together and welcomed me, and I felt very welcomed by the entire team. But more especially, two ladies that came to me on the first week, Rosie and Tracy, and everyone knows them, and they gave me the biggest hug and said to me, don't worry, we've got you. If you need anything, we're here. And they literally schooled me into everything that I needed to do and know in Brighton. So, thank you.
Fascinating. And I mean, when I first met you, it was very apparent to me that you were a boss in how you talk and how you walk. And I suppose my next question is about the characteristics that are required to be a good leader. What do you think they are? And knowing that you have them, are these things that you've learned along the way because you had to, or have you naturally always been that boss lady?
I wouldn't consider myself a boss lady, but thank you. I think for me, my personality-wise is I'm Aries, right? And I recall one day someone telling me that you're cursed by your zodiac. If anyone knows with Aries, we have no filter. And I say as I feel, and sometimes I explode. But the best way that I can explain myself is that there's always a fire raging in, right? And there's always an explosion that wants to take place. But I think in hindsight, as you go along in years and as you develop your leadership skills, you learn how to control that fire. And that fire becomes your superpower. And you know when to unleash the power or that fire with the right amounts of flame that you want to say that. But I think what makes an effective leader is you need to know when to lead your team from behind and from the front, and when to lead them from the back and walk alongside them. I think management styles previously have been so rigid, but over the years, as industries changed and as we've come along and as we know that we live in a very diverse society dealing with different levels of people, we've had to learn that your management style can't be static, it has to be fluid. So how you deal with Flossie down the road is different from how you will deal with Joe Blow down the road. And you've just got to keep changing yourself and developing yourself. But I think the key thing is to make sure that you don't forget that everyone's human.
Sure. And my last question for you is, in terms of leadership, statistics for women of colour remain low, which is, I would say, quite apparent in Sussex. How important is representation at leadership level in the hospitality industry?
So I'll tell you a funny story very quickly. I can write a book about this, but I'm trying to obviously abbreviate the long story that I have. For those of you who don't know, I come from South Africa, and South Africa obviously has a very, very different structure in terms of race, nationality, and just the entire system. And I'm I come from a mixed race home. My dad would be considered mixed race, my mom would be considered Asian. But strangely enough, I'm considered black in South Africa. So my last assignment in South Africa as general manager for Acres Palace Hotel and Casino, my first day when I walked into to meet everyone in the boardroom, my then deputy, I overheard him say, "Are you hiring her as a statistic, or can she actually do the job?" And not that I'm being ageist or going into the racial card, but he was obviously a male Afrikaans man, and coming from South Africa, he now has to report into a black female. So I politely greeted him and introduced myself and shook his hand, not firmly but gently, and said to him, "Hi, just so you know, definitely notice that, we'll talk." But I think at that time I needed him to understand that I was not just here because, I'm female or I'm considered black. I'm here because I earned the right to be here. I studied, I worked along the way, and just as much as he thought he could contribute to the business, I could do the same. We worked together for about 18 months, and then he actually probably about, I think, two months later decided that he was, going to go out and find his own path, and we parted on really good ways. But the key thing is that when he left, he said to me, "Thank you for all I taught him," because there was just so much more that he didn't know. And I think, coming back to your question, how important is it for us to have women in leadership, especially women in color? I think the one thing we realized is that, like I said to you, the world's changed. When I grew up, I always thought that a hotel manager was a white man in a black suit with a white shirt and a tie. And how many of you actually check in hotels and you go, "Where's the manager?" And you get a female coming out with a red dress or hair done and heels, and you think, "Is that the manager?" Yes, she is. And the difference is, it's because I think it's the resilience that we as women have. I don't have kids, but I'm sure those of you sitting in the room today, you've got kids, you've got grandkids, you've got nieces, nephews, and you've got to have different roles all at once. You've got to be a mother, a wife, a doctor, a nurse, a caregiver. And I think that's the difference between having women in top tier leadership, is that we're resilient. We can juggle 10 different things all at once. And we can still go home and cook our partners, husbands, kids a meal, and still find time to read their book. So I think that's why it's key, because as our industries and our businesses grow, I think inclusion is necessary to actually show that, hold on, we can now include a whole range of people, and bringing in that whole range just gives you better collaboration and makes it run an even more successful business.
Definitely.